hunters who went missing in the Allegheny woods. When the search team finally reached that hidden hollow in the backcountry, the forest felt wrong. The trees leaned inward, the air thick like something was holding its breath. And then they looked down and saw them, Marcus Thorne, Eli Brennan, and Ray Blackfeather, sitting upright against the soil wall, alive, silent, and staring ahead like they'd been waiting for someone to arrive. Their gear was nowhere near them. Their boots were missing. And the strangest part? All three men were breathing in the same slow rhythm, perfectly synced, as if something out there had taught them how to move together. No one could explain how they survived, or who or what kept them there. Before we go any further, if this is your first time here, we'd love for you to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. Your support means the world and helps us bring you even more powerful stories. Stick with us until the end, and if this mystery moves you, share your thoughts in the comments and pass it along to a friend. Every October, right when the leaves in western Pennsylvania start turning that deep copper color, Marcus Thorne packed his gear, tightened the straps on his old canvas pack, and made the same promise he made every year. One more trip with the boys. Marcus wasn't young anymore, early 50s, knees that complained every time he crouched, and a beard that had more gray than he cared to admit. But he had that steady confidence hunters get after decades of reading the land like a second language. Waiting beside his truck were his longtime friends. Eli Brennan, white guy, mid-40s, loud laugh, always wore a camo cap that sat crooked on his head. Ray Blackfeather, older native hunter, quiet, patient, the kind of man who looked like he could sit still for hours and listen to the forest breathe. These three had been walking into the Allegheny backcountry since they were young men. Same routes, same rituals, same jokes. But this year, something about the mountains felt different. Even the air seemed thicker, carrying a heavy dampness that clung to skin and wrapped itself around the lungs. Marcus kept rubbing his palms on his jeans, not from cold, but from an odd tension he couldn't shake. The first warnings. Before heading toward the trailhead, they stopped at a small general store in the nearest town. The place had dusty shelves, a humming fridge, and a bored cashier tapping his thumb on the counter. But the moment the three hunters walked in, the cashier glanced up, then quickly lowered his eyes. A man near the coffee machine muttered under his breath, "Those the fellas going up the ridge?" "Yeah, looks like it." Not a good weekend for it. Eli, being Eli, tried to break the tension. He lifted a pack of jerky and waved it at the coffee guy. "What? Somebody up there handing out bad luck?" The man didn't laugh. He didn't even smile. He just shrugged, eyes drifting toward the window that faced the tree line. Ray noticed, raised an eyebrow, but he didn't say a word. At the counter, the cashier scanned their items slowly, fingers shaking just a little. "You boys staying above Laurel Hollow?" Marcus nodded. "Yeah. Couple nights." The cashier hesitated, a tiny pause where he gripped the edge of the counter harder than necessary. "Stay on the marked trails," he said softly. "The woods have been different lately." Eli chuckled. "Different how?" The cashier swallowed, eyes shifting to the floor. "They've been moving." The silence that followed was sharp enough to cut through the hum of the fridge. Marcus gave a polite nod, but something cold slid down his back. Not fear, just a quiet, unsettling awareness, like someone had draped a thin layer of ice across his shoulders. As they walked out, two older women near the newspaper stand whispered, "That the trio going in?" Happens every year." They never learn, do they? Marcus didn't stop walking, but he heard every word. The walk in. By noon, they parked at the gravel pull-off near the forest boundary. The sky was overcast, not stormy, just dull, like the sun was wrapped in wool. The entrance to the woods felt unusually still. No birdsong, no rustling leaves, no water drip, just a low, heavy quiet pressing against their ears. Ray paused first, rested a hand on the bark of a tall maple. "Tree feels cold," he murmured. Marcus tested it, pressed his own palm against the bark. He exhaled slowly. It did feel cold. Much colder than the air, but he brushed it off and adjusted his pack strap. The first few miles were normal enough, crunching leaves, the earthy smell of damp moss, Eli talking nonstop about a new scope he bought. Marcus kept glancing at the ground, scanning for tracks, noting fresh deer prints, the soft drag marks of wild turkey wings. But then, the ground changed. Not suddenly, not dramatically, just gradually thicker, softer, as if the soil had been churned recently. And then came the markings. Not carved. Not scratched. More like pressed. Thin, parallel lines running up the sides of trees, perfectly spaced. Too clean for animals. Too low for branches. Marcus crouched, fingertips brushing the grooves. That's not natural. Eli stepped back, adjusting his cap nervously. You thinking what I'm thinking? Marcus didn't answer. Ray squinted at the base of the nearest pine. Circle on the ground. They all stepped closer. A perfect ring of flattened leaves, even, smooth, no footprints entering or exiting. Marcus's throat tightened. The forest had no wind right now. Nothing should have made a ring perfect enough to look deliberate. You boys want to keep going? Eli asked quietly. Marcus lifted his pack again, jaw tightening. We didn't come all this way to turn around. Ray gave a single nod. Then stay sharp. Night 1. The clicking. They reached their usual campsite near dusk, a small clearing surrounded by tight clusters of pines. Marcus set down his pack, stretching his back with a low groan, shoulders rolling. Eli struck up the campfire. Ray sat on a log, listening quietly, breathing slow and measured. As darkness deepened, the forest stayed strangely still. Even the crackle of the fire felt too loud. Then came the sound. A soft, rhythmic clicking somewhere far off in the woods. Click, 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 click. Eli stopped mid-sentence. Marcus froze while adjusting a strap. Ray slowly lifted his head. The clicking continued. Not fast, not aggressive. Just steady. Almost like tapping a spoon against glass, but far off, deep in the trees. It wasn't an animal. Not any that belonged here. Ray whispered. It's pacing. Marcus's skin prickled. But he didn't move. Didn't speak. Just listened. The clicking drifted left, then right, then stopped altogether. No footsteps. No leaves moving. Just gone. Eli swallowed. I don't like that. Marcus took a slow breath through his nose. Let's keep watch in shifts tonight. Ray nodded once. Something's aware of us. The fire popped softly, and from somewhere out in the dark, far enough to be safe but close enough to hear, a second clicking started. Soft. Patient. Measured. The three men exchanged looks. Silent. Controlled. Each one understanding the same unspoken truth. Something out there was circling them, studying them, and the Allegheny woods were no longer quiet. The morning after the clicking sounds, the forest woke up in a strange kind of silence. Not peaceful, not calm, just muted. Like someone had turned the volume of the world down a little too far. Marcus stretched by the fire pit, rubbing a knot in his shoulder. His fingers kept pausing, these tiny little hesitations, as if his muscles were waiting for something to happen again. Eli moved around camp, kicking leaves, muttering to himself. Ray crouched near the tree line, touching the soil with two fingertips, eyes narrowed. He whispered, something walked here last night, but didn't leave tracks. Marcus joined him, leaning over his shoulder. The soil was smooth. Too smooth, a faint depression in the leaves, but no clear print. Marcus breathed. That's not an animal. Ray nodded once. Not anything with weight. Eli snorted nervously behind them. Great. Love that for us. They packed their gear slowly, all three of them scanning the woods between movements, little glances over shoulders, brushing dust from their pant legs, adjusting straps that didn't need adjusting. Human micro-movements, the kind people make when they're trying not to show they're scared. When they stepped deeper into the forest, the air thickened. The ridge ahead was cloaked in pale fog, drifting low to the soil like something clinging to the ground. Marcus led, hiking with steady, deliberate steps, but halfway up the slope, they stopped. Eli squinted. Hey, do you see that? Marcus followed his gaze. Up ahead, branches had bent into an arch, not broken, just bowed, forming a doorway of woven limbs. Pine needles still attached. Sap still wet, whatever made it, did so recently. Ray crouched beneath it, fingertips grazing the bark. This wasn't wind. Marcus turned slowly, scanning the woods behind them, and for a split second, he swore he saw movement. A shadow shifting behind a tree trunk. Not running. Not hiding. Just repositioning, like someone adjusting their viewpoint. His pulse tightened, but he kept moving. The last footage, By late afternoon, fog rolled in thick enough to blur the tree line. Eli raised his phone, attempting to document the strange arch and the quiet woods. In the video, Marcus's voice is steady as he narrates their position. Ray's silhouette moves in the background, calm, methodical. Then, halfway through recording, a sound catches their attention. A hollow knock. From deep inside the fog. Too rhythmic to be random. Eli turns the camera. You can barely see anything in the clip, just gray haze and shapes of distant trunks. But then, faintly, a figure appears at the edge of visibility. Not close. Not distinct. Just standing. Still. Watching. Eli whispers, "What the?" And the footage cuts off abruptly, as if he brought the phone down quickly. This was the last video they ever recorded, because 20 minutes later all three men walked toward a sound, a low, almost calling tone, drifting through the trees. And none of them came back out. The search begins. When Marcus, Eli, and Ray missed their check-in that night, nobody panicked right away. Hunters sometimes stayed later, or fell asleep early. But by sunrise, when the truck still sat untouched at the pull-off, the sheriff assembled a small team. Rangers trekked in first, stepping carefully through the fog. Dogs pulled at their leashes, sniffing hard, eager to work. But something was wrong from the start. The dogs hesitated at the first fork in the trail, whining softly, ears pinned back. One refused to cross the boundary line, where the forest floor dipped into a darker patch of soil. The handler tugged gently, but the dog planted itself, trembling. "Never seen her do that," he muttered. As they pushed deeper, the woods felt tightened around them, like a dome of thick air closing in. Rangers moved subtly closer together, shoulders almost brushing. At the hunter's campsite, nothing was overturned. Nothing scattered. No sign of struggle. Just an extinguished fire pit and 3 sitting logs perfectly aligned. Almost too perfectly. One ranger whispered, "Someone cleaned this." Another shook his head. But who? And why? And then the tracking began to fall apart. Vanishing trails. The first tracks they found, Marcus's prints, led halfway across a ridge and then simply ended. Not faded. Not washed away. Ended. A straight stop, like someone lifted him off the ground. Ray's prints curved around a tree twice, then looped backward over themselves. The pattern didn't make sense. No hunter circles the same tree in perfect rings. Not in fog. Not at night. Not ever. Meanwhile, Eli's footprints went 20 yards into a patch of moss, and then vanished into nothing but untouched soil. Rangers exchanged uneasy glances. The sheriff rubbed his jaw, muttering, "This doesn't add up." A volunteer tracker, older man with decades of experience, knelt near the looping tracks. His breath hitched slightly as he examined the soil. "The forest was different that night," he whispered. Something was moving that wasn't on the ground. One ranger chuckled nervously. "Meaning what?" "A ghost." The tracker didn't answer. He stood slowly, brushing dirt from his palms, his eyes scanning the branches high above. "The movement wasn't horizontal," he murmured. "It was vertical." No one spoke after that. Gear found, but wrong. 2 days into the search, they found the hunter's gear. All of it. But not scattered. Not damaged. Not weathered. Everything was arranged in a neat row on a dry patch of land. Rifles wiped clean, jackets folded, knives placed parallel to each other. Someone had organized it. Ranger Collins whispered, "This feels like they were being tidied away." Another ranger shook his head, whispering low, "Or prepared." Even the forest around the gear was different, quieter, like the air itself had been pressed into stillness. That's when radios picked up something impossible. A faint voice. Not words. Just mimicry. A slow, deliberate imitation of someone calling. Who? The sound stretched unnaturally long, rising and falling like something was learning a voice in real time. The rangers froze, breaths suspended. "That's not human," one said quietly. The sheriff clicked his radio off. "No one moves alone," he muttered. 2 months of nothing. For the next 8 weeks, everything stalled. Searches continued, but clues grew fewer. Fog thickened earlier in the day. Locals whispered more aggressively whenever search trucks rolled by. "They won't find them." The woods took them. The Allegheny doesn't return what it keeps. By winter, the case was cold. Then, in late December, nearly 2 months after the disappearance, a hiker stumbled into the ranger station, pale, soaking wet, insisting he heard coordinated footsteps in a hollow deeper than any marked trail. "Sounded like 3 people walking in a circle," he whispered. "Perfect rhythm." "No breaks." The sheriff closed his notebook slowly. "Show us." Search teams grabbed their packs. The forest tightened around them once more. And this time, it felt like something was guiding them inward. The search team followed the hiker deep into the hollow, farther than any ranger normally traveled without ropes or a second team. The air grew denser with each step, colder too, even though the sun sat high above the canopy. Marcus's name hung in the air like a weight nobody wanted to say out loud anymore. 2 months missing in the Allegheny meant one thing: recovery, not rescue. Yet the hiker kept insisting. "They're not far." I heard them, not talking, just moving. Trackers walked slower than usual, boots pressing into soft moss that released a faint, damp smell with every step. Rangers exchanged small, worried glances, the kind people give when they know something is off, but not enough to turn back. When they reached the hollow, everything fell silent. The place felt wrong instantly. Not dangerous, just strange. Trees leaned inward, as if bowing toward the center. Light dimmed, even though clouds hadn't rolled in. The ground dipped like a shallow bowl. Ranger Collins brushed his thumb across the handle of his radio, a nervous, repetitive movement he didn't seem aware of. "Feels like a pocket," he murmured. Like something scooped the land inward. The sheriff stepped ahead, lifting a hand for quiet. That's when they heard it. Soft movement. Not footsteps, more like shifting weight. Slow, steady, in perfect rhythm. 3 shuffles. Pause. 3 shuffles. Pause. It echoed faintly through the hollow, almost ceremonial. Collins whispered, "You hearing that?" Everyone nodded. Their boots sank deeper into the soft ground as they edged closer toward the sound. The forest seemed to hold its breath, branches unmoving, air thick with something unsaid. And then they saw it. A narrow opening in the earth, not a cave, not a sinkhole, just a natural depression hidden by overgrown ferns. The kind of thing only someone extremely desperate or extremely lost would stumble into. Sheriff Rourke crouched first, pushing foliage aside. His breath caught. There, in the shaded hollow below, 3 figures sat upright against the soil wall. Shoulders slumped, heads lowered, breathing slow and shallow like they were half asleep. Their clothing damp, dirt clinging to sleeves and pant legs. Marcus Thorne, Eli Brennan, Ray Blackfeather, alive, not struggling, not calling out, just sitting, as if waiting. Rangers exchanged stunned looks. One whispered, How are they alive?" Ray was the first to lift his head. His eyelids fluttered like someone waking from a heavy dream. His voice cracked as he looked at the sheriff. "You came back." The phrase hit everyone like cold water. "Came back?" Marcus shifted next. Slowly, like his muscles were restarting, his hand slid across the soil wall, pressing lightly into the dirt, almost as if he was reassuring himself it was real. Eli blinked hard, murmuring, "We didn't think you'd find us." The sheriff stepped down into the hollow with deliberate care. "How long have you been here?" Marcus took a long, shaky breath. "Time doesn't work right down here." His voice wasn't fearful, just exhausted. Ray's breathing deepened. "It followed us, not with feet. With pattern." The sheriff froze. "Pattern?" Ray nodded once, eyes drifting toward the tree line. "Circling. Always circling." The forest around them hummed faintly. Not a sound exactly, more like pressure shifting in the air. Collins signaled for ropes. Rangers descended carefully, avoiding loose soil, keeping their movement slow and steady. They lifted Marcus first. His legs trembled when his boots touched solid ground. Eli followed, inhaling deeply as if the air above the hollow felt different, cleaner. Ray was last, eyes still drifting back toward the depression, as if the land itself was watching him leave. As the team secured them with blankets and hydration packs, the sheriff leaned close. "Why didn't you leave the hollow?" "You weren't trapped." Marcus swallowed hard, rubbing mud from his hands onto the blanket. "We tried the first day." Eli nodded weakly. "Every direction looked the same." "We kept ending up back here," Ray added, voice low. The forest didn't want us wandering. The sheriff stared at him. So what did it want? Ray hesitated. A long pause, like he wasn't sure if the words mattered anymore. To keep us still. The aftermath, the men were airlifted out within hours, medics checking their pulses and hydration levels repeatedly. The strange part wasn't their condition, it was their stability. No severe fatigue. No malnutrition signs. No injuries. It was as if something had preserved them. At the hospital, Marcus barely spoke. When he did, he kept rubbing the back of his neck, whispering, "It watched us all night, every night." Eli refused to sleep unless the lights were on. Ray sat near the window, staring at the tree line beyond the parking lot. When the sheriff filed his report, he described the rescue in plain terms. But the final line read, "The woods returned them when it decided to." Closing mystery. The hollow where the men were found collapsed 3 days later. Soil filled the dip. Ferns spread over it, as if the forest was erasing evidence. Locals shook their heads when the story got out. The Allegheny takes who it wants, and gives them back when it's done. Even now, hikers avoid that ridge, because people swear that sometimes, at dusk, you can hear faint shuffling in perfect rhythm. 3 steps. Pause. 3 steps. Pause. Not dangerous. Not fast. Just watching. If you want the full breakdown of what happened inside that hollow, and why the Allegheny woods still scare seasoned trackers, hit subscribe and stick around. There are more real stories just like this one, and each one gets stranger the deeper we go.